Parade with City Controller, Los Angeles City Controller Ron Galprin, one of the few elected people in the city of Los Angeles who actually came from a neighborhood council background, if I'm not mistaken.
You are not mistaken. First of all, wishing everybody a great Labor Day. Thank you so much to all the working people, not just of the city of Los Angeles, but throughout our nation. And at a time when working people are under so much pressure, and in a city also where there are so many expenses that keep on rising, what we have here is a group of people coming together to make sure that we not only have good jobs, that we have well-paying jobs, and that we have good working conditions for the people of Los Angeles and well beyond.
So, you're in charge of actually keeping track of all the money in the city. How's the city doing financially?
Well, sometimes I think to myself, I don't control everything, despite the fact that I have the title of city controller, but it is my job to be the watchdog for the people's money. And what we're doing is, in our reports, in our open data, in everything that we do, making sure that the city is held accountable, that it becomes the most efficient that it can be, that we have an ability to reinstill trust in government by actually making sure that that money is well spent and people know that it's being put to the use that it was meant to. And I'll give you my little advertisement for the day as well.
Okay.
All right, which is if you go to lacontroller.org, what you will find is the open checkbook of the city. You'll find the pay for every single person who works for the city. You will find all the real estate that's owned by the city. You'll find every single individual item that is purchased by the city, what we paid for it, who we bought it from, as well as what the payment authorization was, because I believe that sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Yes. And as I recall, when you did an audit of city property, you found, what was it, 9,500 or 95,000 pieces of property?
Well, we have about 8,000 pieces of property that are owned by the city within the county. Now, mind you, some of them are slivers, some of them are also our wonderful parks and all sorts of city facilities, but we also own others that I want to see put to good use for housing, particularly low-income housing, for bridge housing, for those who are experiencing homelessness, for economic and for community development. And even if we use just a small sliver of those for those purposes, imagine the kind of value that we can provide, especially at a time when there's a great need for that community development and that need for housing.
So has City Council actually come to you and said, where are all of the properties we own, so that we don't have to use the homeless housing bond to buy property? Have they actually come and gotten the list from you?
There are. That list is there for everybody to see, and I'm glad to say that there are a number of those properties that have been identified and that are actually going to be put to use for those specific purposes. And that's going to be, I think, a great step forward. Mind you, as we know, the crisis that we have of homelessness is multidimensional, and it's not so easily solved, but the more properties that we can identify to create places where people don't have to be on the street is going to make a big difference.
Well, in CD 15, I do not think the councilman has actually looked at property that the city owns, or he has not designated them. We have a Caltrans lot, and then there's a building I think that the Department of Harbor Department owns over in Wilmington. And it appears as though the Bridge Home project is sort of being invented sort of as we speak, without any type of game plan.
Well, I do know that the council member from San Pedro is very actively involved in trying to find various sites and various solutions to homelessness. But as we also know, while everybody says in the community that we want to have a place for those who are homeless, and while everybody acknowledges the need for it, nobody necessarily then jumps to say, yes, we want it right next door to us. And we have to have a consensus in this city, and we have to have a willingness by everybody who lives in our city that in order to solve this problem, in order to make real progress, we're going to have this kind of housing and these kinds of services everywhere in the city of LA.
Now, as a former neighborhood council member, what part of the city were you from?
I represented a lot of the hillside area, and that was mostly in West Los Angeles.
Right.
But I loved being part of the neighborhood council system, and I'm also still very actively involved because it's really our grassroots democracy here in Los Angeles. It's a chance for people to get involved.
So, as a neighborhood council member, you understood something about building consensus.
Yes.
Very hard thing to do.
Very hard thing to do, but absolutely necessary. And look, for all of those who have issues with the siting of particular places in LA for, let's say, homeless services, the reality is that it's in our midst. It is everywhere. And we cannot allow this humanitarian crisis to continue the way that it has. And I issued a report on this subject already almost a year ago about also the need of how we find ways to clean up our communities, how we find ways to make sure that crime does not result, but how do we also take care of human lives that very much are at risk each and every single day. And we have some other reports that are coming out very soon, which are going to be looking at what kind of metrics are being used in outreach and how effective are those metrics, because if we're not measuring, then how can we expect good results?
Right.
And also looking at the cost of creating some of these units, which we all want to see, but they're really expensive and we've got to find a way to drive those costs down.
Great. Ron Galpin, Controller of the City of Los Angeles, thank you
very
and
much.
happy Labor Day.
Happy Labor Day to you too. Great to be with you. Thanks for all of your coverage.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.